to software development for business, management, and outsourcing. As a disclaimer, nothing in this presentation is or should be taken as legal or financial advice. Any tools, companies, or products that we mention is from our own personal experience. We're not sponsored by them unless otherwise explicitly mentioned. So today what we're going to learn is common misconceptions, some software development methodologies, common terminology, some common and popular developer tools, and going through the process of hiring a developer. So common misconceptions when hiring a developer. The most common ones would be when you hire a developer, a lot of people tend to think that once they hire them, the job is done. The developer will figure everything out, but that's not true. When you hire a developer, you need to have a clear plan for them. What are they going to do? What exactly needs to be developed? And so you need to choose which methodology, what tools are they going to use, and provide them a requirements document, which specifies exactly what the project is, what's the scope of it. And that's what we're going to be going over today. Another thought is the developer has control. That may not be the exact thought, but more like, I don't know how to do this, so I'll let the developer handle it. That can be okay in some cases, but in other cases, not so much. And there are tools that you have to figure out. You can't let the developer be in charge of that, because there have been cases where, a founder doesn't know where their code is stored, how to access it, and a developer will basically steal the code or kind of hold it hostage. And a way to prevent that is to have a contract that outline what belongs to who, and also not giving the developer that kind of control. Another misconception is not thinking that you don't need to use developer language. You don't need to know everything, but it's a good idea to learn at least a bit of it, because if you don't know any, at least a lot of misunderstandings. Another misconception is the idea of developing the product, and once it's done, you don't really need to put in any work. It's there and it's done. But actually, if you look at this product lifecycle, so the software development lifecycle, it goes through generally 5 stages. There's planning, analysis, design, implementation, then maintenance. At the maintenance stage, which is after you already launched your product, is you need to plan and actually budget for it. So say after you launch it, afterwards, you may want to evaluate your system and see how efficient it is, or you need to replace some old hardware to maintain the product that you just launched, or provide updates. So this stage does require that planning and budgeting. So moving on to methodologies, what I'm talking about is software development methodologies, because usually in software development, when you have a project, it's such a huge undertaking, there has to be a methodical approach to it. And these are the most popular methodologies right now. So to start with, there's WATERFALL. It's pretty simple and straightforward. If you look at the diagram on the left, you can imagine this is where it gets its name from. It's very linear, step by step. And it's best to use this methodology when you have all the requirements up front. How it works is that you're approached with this task. There's something that you want to develop. And what you do first is you gather all the requirements you need. So who are the users, the stakeholders? What problems are you trying to solve? What are the use cases? And once you have this list of requirements, you pass it off to a software architect. And so what they do is they take the list of requirements and determine how will these requirements be implemented from a technical standpoint. So what technologies are you going to use? How are you going to build it? How's it going to work? Then once that planning is done, it's passed off to the developers, and this is where they actually code it. And once they code everything they need to code, they pass it off to QA, they test it. Once that looks good, then you launch it. The advantages to this is that it's clear, it's easy to use, very straightforward, it's well documented. You can also determine your budget and your deadline ahead of time. The cons, however, are that all important decisions you need to make are at the top or at the start of the whole process. And, like I said, is because you need all the requirements up front. So if there's somebody who will be part of this process who could have provided some valuable input, you can't implement that into your project and make changes according to that because you had to make those decisions upfront. It's also difficult to make changes after the analysis and design stages, meaning once you pass it off to the development team, it's really hard to make those changes. You also can't make interim releases, meaning as you're going through the process and as you develop the product, you can't release it, say 50% of the way through, 75%, there's just 0%, and then it's done. A problem with this is that by the end of this whole process, which because it's such a huge project, it may take 9 months, and by the end of it, you might have something that nobody wants because it couldn't respond to any feedback. So that brings me to the next point, agile. So this is not it's not a methodology, it's more of a mindset. So not a set of practices, but values and principles. It's more of a response to WATERFALL. And it comes from a manifesto that was developed by a group of people who recognized these shortcomings in how people were approaching software development. And so this is best when the development team you have is knowledgeable and dedicated to the task that you give them. The advantages is that it allows for change and feedback, but the disadvantages is that it's very difficult to determine the delivery date and the budget that you'll have. So one real life application or implementation of Agile is Scrum. It's an iterative model, and you could think of it as pretty much the process of WATERFALL, but instead of for the whole project, you only do it for features. And what they do is they work in 1 to 2 week long iterations that we call sprints. And for each sprint, it starts with a list of tasks or tickets, and you do sprint planning. So you meet with the developer team and they determine what tickets or tasks are they going to take within the sprint, this 1 to 2 week long iteration, and determine, okay, what's the appropriate amount of work that we can take on and get done within this time. Then for each day, you have these daily stand-ups where the team will meet and discuss the progress that they've done so far and anything that they're stuck on so they can get help. Then by the end of it, you have retrospectives, which is when the team meets and they write down things that they've done well, what they should continue doing, and what they didn't do so well, what they need to change. So this is best when your team is small, is dedicated and experienced. The pros about it is that there's increased transparency, visibility, and team accountability. It also allows for feedback because by the end of each sprint, once you finish developing that feature, you have something to show to other stakeholders and users. You can test it and see, does this make sense to them, or is this what they're looking for? And then you can adapt and change. So within the next sprint, you can change the direction. Okay, this is not what they want. Disadvantages is that there's an undetermined deadline and cost because you're always constantly taking in those changes, that feedback. You never really know when it's going to be done. And also because there are a lot of meetings that is part of this process, it can be distracting for everybody involved.